This particular reading from St. John's Gospel, which is the last of the Gospels written, and by a very young person at the time, it was written by St. John, is very different than any of the other synoptics that we have, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, simply because of the, first of all, the age and the way in which John uses a lot of Greek influences to write his message. But these first 17 verses of the 3rd chapter of John actually tell the story of salvation history, if we listen very closely to it. It talks to us about doubt. It talks to us about wonder. It talks to us about the kinds of questions that we generally have. Now, from a literary perspective, Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee, who was, this renowned teacher and kind of a very knowledgeable person, comes to Jesus and begins to ask him some questions, primarily to try and catch the guy. Nicodemus actually knew all that he was asking, and he actually knew the answers to the questions he posed to Jesus. But what Jesus does is he actually talks about the journey from the beginning to the time of his death and resurrection, of being raised up. And one of the reasons we have this particular reading during the season of Lent is because that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking the time, and maybe we're asking those questions. And we're being introspective. And the reality of it is that every one of us who sits in this church, and most people who walk in this community, we know the answers to these questions because they have been conditioned in such a way. But for whatever reason, because of the human condition we have, there are many times in which we just want to kind of put it aside and not deal with it. And Jesus' responses to Nicodemus this morning were pretty straightforward. When Jesus starts by saying, "Very truly, I tell you," it's a matter of fact. Let me tell you, is what he's saying. Let me tell you. What, Nicodemus, do you not understand about what you're asking? Because it's very, very clear. And he marks the journey. He uses Moses. He uses his own journey about how the baptism of water and the Spirit are so important. And how out of that baptism comes the whole concept of what covenant ministry is all about. Working together. Working as a community. With all of the struggles that we have to endure in order to literally get to the point of celebrating resurrection. And the focus and concentration of the season of Lent is that time in which we take to introspectively look and say, what is it I don't get? What is it I don't understand? Is it going to take more for me to become heavily involved in ministry, or I'm going to take, like Nicodemus, I really know what needs to be done, but I got to ask these questions because maybe I can find another way. I can remember one time way back when in my younger day, which was many years ago, and when I was not very experienced as a minister, and I was teaching a religion course. And it came time for conferences. And I was standing there, filled with zeal, filled with knowing that I had all the answers for everything that ever needed to be asked about religion. And in comes this mom. And she storms the room, kind of like a female Nicodemus, and gets right up and violates the space in front and says to me, "What have you done to make my son go back to church?" And me, in my infinite wisdom, said, oh, I should have never said it, but I said it. "Well, what did you do to make him stop?" Well, that discussion of what happened is another topic. The point being is it's very clear when you find something such as that. It's the story of Nicodemus coming to Jesus. What is it that you do? Or what is it that you lack? How can we constructively ask the question, how can we do better? And and what is it that we want to do? And that's what Jesus is telling Nicodemus. Take the time. You know the answer. You know what needs to be done. And when you come to that knowledge, you will then be able to recognize the joy of resurrection, because just as Jesus was raised up on that cross, it was through that death and destruction and hurt and concern and love and compassion that Jesus was able to say, it is finished. And with that word, he died. All of a sudden, there is this aura of silence, this aura of contemplation. What happened? Why did it happen? And only when Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene 3 days later did she and the rest of the apostles recognize the divinity, the love, and the compassion, not of the Jesus they knew, but of what Jesus talks about this morning, the risen Christ, the one in which we have placed our faith, our hope, our love, to bring us to that same state. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.